Clement Vallandigham. Most lawyers will tell you they'd kill for their clients. Clement Vallandigham took that dedication to a whole new level. Vallandigham was defending Thomas McGeehan, accused of murdering a man named Tom Myers during a barroom brawl in Hamilton, Ohio. His defense strategy was bold. He would prove that Myers hadn't been murdered at all. The poor drunk had accidentally shot himself while fumbling to draw his own pistol from his pocket. It was the kind of theatrical defense that could win over a jury if demonstrated convincingly enough. So there's Vallandigham in his hotel room at the Golden Lamb, practicing his big courtroom demonstration for his colleagues. He had 2 pistols laid out, one loaded for reference, one unloaded for the demonstration. The plan was simple: show exactly how a drunk man could accidentally discharge his weapon while drawing it.
"Gentlemen, watch carefully,"
he likely said with lawyerly confidence.
"The deceased held a pistol like this in his pocket, and when he went to draw it,
He grabbed what he thought was the unloaded pistol, shoved it in his pocket, and dramatically pulled it out just as the victim would have done. Except in the dim hotel lighting, he'd grabbed the loaded gun. The pistol fired, sending a bullet directly into Vallandigham's abdomen in the exact trajectory he was trying to demonstrate. His face went white as he stared at his colleagues in shock.
"My God, I think I shot myself,"
he gasped, probably realizing in that horrifying moment that he'd just become his own demonstration dummy. Vallandigham died in agony 12 hours later. But here's where this tragedy turns into the darkest of comedies. His demonstration had been so convincing, so perfectly executed, that his legal team decided to use his death as evidence. The jury was completely persuaded. How could they not be? A man had just died proving this exact scenario was possible, and McGeehan was acquitted of murder. Draco the lawgiver, the Athenian legislator whose name literally became synonymous with brutal harshness. This guy created Athens' first written legal code, and it was so ridiculously severe that basically everything from stealing a cabbage to murder was punishable by death. Minor property crimes? Death? Loitering? Probably death. Looking at a magistrate funny. You guessed it, death. When people later asked why his laws were so harsh, Draco supposedly explained that minor crimes deserved death, and he couldn't think of a worse punishment for major crimes. His legal code was so comically brutal that people said it was written in blood instead of ink, and the term draconian still means unreasonably harsh over 2,600 years later. Ironically, Draco's strict code made him beloved. Athenians really did love a bit of structure. When Draco attended a theater performance on the island of Aegina, he was greeted as a celebrity. Draco is standing in the theater, feeling pretty good about himself as the crowd begins showing their appreciation. But in ancient times, applause came with a wardrobe donation. The first few cloaks land on him, then more hats and garments start flying through the air, then more and more and more. The audience, in their enthusiasm to honor the famous lawgiver, kept hurling their heavy woolen cloaks, their hymations, their caps, and whatever other clothing they could pull off without getting arrested for public indecency. What started as a respectful tribute quickly turned into an accidental burial as the pile of clothing on top of Draco grew higher and heavier. Meanwhile, Draco was trapped under what was rapidly becoming a very expensive and very heavy pile of fabric, unable to call for help because his mouth was covered, unable to move because the weight was too great, and probably thinking something along the lines of, "This is the stupidest way to die," in his final moments. The theater attendants and ushers, seeing a huge mound of valuable clothing on the stage, probably assumed it was just an enthusiastic display of public affection, and didn't realize there was an actual human being suffocating underneath it all until it was far too late. If you've ever thought love couldn't kill you, history would like a word. Epedocles. Here we have one of ancient Greece's most fascinating philosopher-scientists, a guy who came up with the theory of the 4 elements that would dominate Western thought for literally 2,000 years. Epedocles was brilliant, influential, and had convinced a significant number of people that he was basically a divine figure who had transcended normal human limitations. This guy had developed such a massive ego that he genuinely believed he was immortal, or at least well on his way to becoming a god. According to ancient sources, Empedocles decided that the best way to prove his godhood and achieve immortality was to throw himself into Mount Etna, one of the most active volcanoes in the Mediterranean. His reasoning, as far as anyone can tell, was that if he disappeared without leaving a body behind, people would assume he had ascended to join the gods on Mount Olympus, thus cementing his divine status for eternity. So our philosopher god climbed up to the crater of this actively erupting volcano and, in front of whatever witnesses he'd brought along to spread the story of his divine ascension, jumped into the molten hellscape below. Empedocles presumably expected to vanish without a trace. Instead, Mount Etna had other plans for maintaining this guy's mystique. According to the ancient historian Diogenes Laertius, the volcano promptly spat out one of Empedocles' distinctive bronze sandals, which washed up on the mountainside like the world's most embarrassing piece of evidence. The gods must have looked down and said, "Not this guy again." King Edward II. If there were an award for most spectacularly bad at being a king, Edward II would be a strong contender. He lost wars to Scotland, let his favorite nobles run the country into the ground, and generally proved that being born royal doesn't automatically make you good at the job. His wife, Queen Isabella, got so fed up with his incompetence and his obsession with his male favorites that she teamed up with her lover, Roger Mortimer, invaded England and forced Edward to abdicate in favor of their teenage son. But deposing a king creates a messy problem. What do you do with the ex-king who still has supporters and could theoretically reclaim the throne? Isabella and Mortimer's solution was to lock Edward up in Berkeley Castle under the care of some lords who were, let's say, loyal to the new regime. For months, they tried various methods to make Edward die of natural causes. They kept him in terrible conditions, starved him, and even allegedly kept him above a pit of rotting corpses, hoping the fumes would kill him. But the former king stubbornly refused to die from their passive-aggressive murder attempts. Finally, in September 1327, Edward's captors decided they needed a more direct approach, but with one crucial requirement. The body had to tell a lie, death by nature, not by hand. So they came up with what might be the most horrifically creative assassination method in history. According to the chronicler Geoffrey Le Baker, the killers held Edward down and inserted a red-hot poker into his body through his anus, burning his internal organs from the inside. Edward had been accused of having homosexual relationships with his favorites, so his murderers decided to kill him in a way that brutally mocked those allegations. His screams were reportedly so loud and agonizing that they could be heard throughout the castle and the surrounding village. When Edward's corpse was displayed, people could see no obvious signs of violence, allowing Isabella and Mortimer to claim he'd died of natural causes. Of course, nobody actually believed this. The rumors about the red-hot poker spread immediately and have persisted for 700 years. Duke Jing of Jin. Duke Jing was a ruler in ancient China who began having vivid, disturbing dreams about a demon or evil spirit. Being superstitious, he consulted his court shamans and diviners who gave him the worst possible news: he wouldn't live to taste the next harvest of wheat. Basically, they told him he was going to die before the new grain came in. Jing was understandably freaked out by this death prophecy, but as the months passed and he remained alive and healthy, he started to relax. Then the wheat harvest finally arrived and the Duke was absolutely thrilled. He'd made it. The prophecy was wrong. He'd survived to see the new wheat, which meant those doomsaying shamans didn't know what they were talking about. Feeling incredibly smug and wanting to rub it in everyone's faces, Duke Jing ordered his servants to bring him a bowl of freshly made wheat porridge. He summoned the shaman who'd predicted his death and basically said, "Look at this! You were completely wrong about me dying." Just as Duke Jing lifted the first spoonful of new wheat porridge, a sudden, urgent need for the privy hit him. His stomach was churning from all the anxiety and excitement of the moment. He set the bowl down and hurried to the toilet. Now, ancient Chinese toilets weren't like modern bathrooms. They were essentially deep pits dug into the ground, sometimes several feet deep, filled with human waste that would decompose over time. The Duke hurried to his privy, still chuckling about proving the prophecy wrong, and positioned himself over the toilet pit. Then something went catastrophically wrong. The rotten wooden platform gave way beneath him, and Duke Jing toppled forward, falling headfirst into the deep pit of human waste below. The pit was deep, and the sewage too thick for him to stand or climb out. By the time his servants reached him, he had already drowned in the privy, suffocated in the fetid mixture of excrement and liquid waste. Heraclitus of Ephesus. This guy spent his entire philosophical career being deliberately obscure, cryptic, and generally impossible to understand. Heraclitus was one of those ancient Greek thinkers who wrote in riddles and paradoxes, dropping profound statements like, "You cannot step into the same river twice," and "The way up and the way down are the same," which made everyone scratch their heads while pretending they totally got what he meant. He grew so disgusted with humanity that he withdrew completely, retreating to the mountains to live off grass and wild herbs. For years, he survived like a one-man nature experiment, a philosopher turned recluse. But his extreme lifestyle eventually backfired. He developed a condition called dropsy, a buildup of fluid that left him grotesquely swollen, as if his body had decided to drown itself from the inside out. Any sane man would have sought help, but Heraclitus had long dismissed doctors as fools, convinced only his intellect could save him. He concluded his cure lay in balance. The element of fire must counter the element of water. His master plan? To bury himself in a steaming heap of manure and let the heat bake the water out of him. Heraclitus had his servants cover him in a thick layer of cow dung and then just lay there, marinating in feces like the world's most philosophical hot dog, hoping the compost heat would fix his swollen body. But unfortunately, instead of sweating out the excess fluid and achieving some kind of miraculous barnyard cure, Heraclitus just lay there in the dung, getting weaker and sicker. The smell was strong enough to evacuate a whole village, so nobody got close. And by the time anyone checked, Heraclitus had already completed his circle of life as compost. Some say the blazing sun turned his manure cocoon into a boiling pot and cooked him alive. Others claim wild dogs dug him up before he could even finish his experiment. Either way, his cure proved far deadlier than his disease. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and stay safe.